Have you experienced trauma?
We all have to some extent.
Any event that caused you significant emotional pain can leave a scar of trauma.
Of course, there's a very wide spectrum of severity of trauma.
Welcome back to our Change How You Think weekly video podcast.
If you'd like to hear from us every week, then subscribe to our videos on YouTube or click on the weekly video tab at the top of this page, fill in the subscription form, and you'll get our free self-assessment ebook, Healthy Moods, along with your choice of mental, spiritual, or relationship information.
This week we have a special guest, Crystal Wilson. She's a psychotherapist here in Ontario and a good friend of ours. We invited her to come and talk to us about trauma.
This video is the first part of a longer interview where she explains both the symptoms and the healing journey for trauma.
In this segment, she describes how trauma can affect you and how it can have lingering effects even many years later.
And we'll talk to you after the video. Well, today we have a special guest to join us, and this is Crystal Wilson, and she's a registered psychotherapist, and she's based in Ontario, Canada, and we've known each other for years. Crystal, we go to the same church. Crystal is an extraordinarily gifted, anointed worship leader, and she is an amazing singer, though unfortunately she's not going to sing for us today. But she actually has a counseling profession, and we just invited Crystal on today because she has such a wealth of wisdom in all the topics that we talk about in our ministry. And so, Crystal, we want to welcome you today, and we're just going to pick your brain, and we're going to look at just one real narrow area of your area of expertise. And today we want to talk about trauma. Now, for people who follow our ministry, they know that we're always talking about how to unload emotional baggage, because emotional baggage is just always interfering with our life. And when we talk about unloading baggage, we talk about having Jesus heal the wounds of our past and remove the lies that we believed about the wounds. And so wounds and trauma, I mean, they're connected. But today we want to talk specifically about trauma. Also, trauma is a word that gets thrown around all the time. Everyone is talking about trauma, and it means different things to different people. And so we just thought we'd have an expert on today to give us your view of the situation, but also what do we do about it? As a Christian, what do we do about it? So it's just a real treat to have you with us, Crystal. So why don't you just start and tell us how would you define trauma, or what does the word mean to you as a therapist?
Mm-hmm. Well, Grant, thanks for having me with you today. Trauma is anything that exceeds and exhausts your nervous system's ability to cope. And trauma is a psychological and physiological response to an event or stimuli that is difficult to prepare for. And so when you encounter an event that is difficult to prepare for ahead of time, you're not sure what's coming, our lives can feel like they're flipped upside down. When it does occur, it's like something has been paralyzed, and it's not easy to move past it for most people. Traumatic events include, but are not limited to, natural disasters, war, car accidents or plane accidents, plane crashes, deaths of loved ones, assault, events like violence or rape. And so what I like to say, or the image that I like to present to people, is that imagine that healthy functioning is like a window. And we call this window a window of tolerance. We're able to handle most stressors in life, and we have a natural resilience to be able to manage emergency or critical situations. But in some situations, a traumatic incident will put you outside of your window of tolerance, and it becomes very difficult to stay within your normal range. And so above your window of tolerance is something we call hyperarousal or hypervigilance, where you are very alert, you're very on guard all the time, quite defensive, and your body's natural mechanism is to keep you safe, and it's doing that around the clock. And beneath the window of tolerance is hypoarousal, which is where your body shuts down around threat and it doesn't know how to respond, so it almost decompensates or winds down as a survival mechanism.
So what you're saying is that at the time of a trauma, you can go into like panic mode, like, where do I run, or be frozen.
Yes.
Like just, in other words, that's the deer in the headlights. I don't know what to do.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
and that you can, in other words, completely shut down, or all, everything screaming in your head.
All the time. Yes.
So in both situations, you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm thinking, how do we separate the feeling overwhelmed in a person's, like sort of normal life and trauma? Are they just sort of degrees of severity?
I would say it is degrees of severity and duration of time. And some people have a very difficult time turning that off, or when they are feeling really shut down, amping it up into a normal speed of life or pace of life. And when they're very wound up, they have a very hard time slowing things down. And so this is a goal for us to keep people in their window of tolerance. And so giving them an opportunity to live normal hours of their lives within that range and acknowledging when they're outside that window.
So, I mean, there are many people who would say, oh yeah, that was a terrible experience, but I'm over it now, and it doesn't have any effect on me now.
Mm.
Um, and so I mean, what to me, when I hear that, they say, well, basically, I'm functioning. But
Mm.
how would a person tell, or how do you tell as a therapist, if the trauma is still actually affecting them? Like
Mhm.
so, they, and you can put on a good front, but how do you tell when the trauma is still an ongoing, chronic, lingering um, source of pain and torment that actually is affecting them more than they are aware?
Mhm. What we usually look for are symptoms. And when we're looking at symptoms, we look at the variation of symptoms, how much and how often, and as you mentioned before, the severity. And when that's going on, we're kind of measuring, is it decreasing over time with the body's natural healing process, or is it intensifying or keeping people feeling stuck or frozen in time? If I could talk about some of the symptoms, I would just describe that major symptoms include symptoms of depression, irritability, numbing, insomnia, hopelessness, nightmares. Some other things that people experience are panic attacks and general anxiety, headaches and flashbacks. Those are some things that come up for people when symptoms are quite severe. Some lesser known symptoms are when people begin to use substances, when they're experiencing eating disorders or self-destructive behaviors, even mistrust of other people or dissociation. Those are some things that occur when those symptoms are at their worst.
Now, some of the symptoms you mentioned there initially, like depression and anxiety and panic, they're also symptoms of mood disorders. So,
Yes.
so in other words, so I think what you're saying is that trauma can actually either mimic or trigger a mood disorder, so that you can get those mood disorder symptoms and actually have the mood disorder as a direct result of the trauma.
Absolutely.
The trauma
Yes.
can drop your serotonin level and tip you into a mood disorder that needs to be treated.
Absolutely. And so it's really important to be aware of what things changed in your environment, if there's a specific event, and if there are some underlying issues, or if there's some issues that predated that event that could be triggered, as you mentioned, in the present, causing those
So,
mood disorders.
so if a person is watching, let's say, what do they look for in themselves to indicate that they really aren't handling their past history of trauma as well as they think they are? So, in other words, someone who has some trauma events in their past, and they're functioning adult, but what would they look for to indicate that they really do need more healing? That the trauma really isn't put to rest; it's still active. It's still
Mhm.
actively affecting them.
So a triggered event would likely be like a door swinging wide open, where memories become visceral and very close at hand. Flashbacks occur, and some other types or patterns of behaviors or relationship patterns start to come up again and bring about a lot of distress. That would be a really good sign that things
Well,
from.
would overreacting, would that qualify? Like an overreaction to something that another person having the same experience without a history of trauma, it wouldn't really affect them.
So overreacting would definitely be one of them. I think that if people have an experience where they've acted outside of their norm, that might be an indicator of that coming up.
So, so let's do some actually concrete examples. So, what would be an example of an overreaction? Something happens in their environment, and they overreact based on a trauma that they had in the past.
Hmm. So trauma is written into our systems by the grouping of stimuli in the environment. So, for example, if someone was victimized by someone with a red shirt, what could happen is a red shirt later in life, in a vulnerable place in your life later on, much later on, that same red shirt and even another sound or a pairing of another stimuli could create that same event in its real intensity. So people could react quite in a quite overwhelmed way to that kind of stimuli or that kind of introduction of
So that
information.
when they see the red shirt, it would immediately, the trauma memory would come back that red shirt equals like run.
Run, get out of here, shut
Yeah.
down, whatever you have to do to keep yourself safe.
Mhm.
Safety is the primary
I
goal.
mean, a smell could do it too. Anything that reminds you of the trauma could
Yes.
then trigger that racing heart, panic, get me out of here. Um, that overwhelmed feeling could come straight back.
Yes, any of that grouping of sensory information could bring that right back, and you feel right back. You feel the same age that you were when you first experienced that kind of trauma.
Yeah, so that would be a flashback because something happened that reminded you of the pain.
Yes.
So that kind of a symptom would indicate that the trauma really is still actively affecting your life and that you need more healing in that area.
Yes, that would be an indicator that it's time to go back and go through it and see what's going on and heal.
So you can see trauma leaves significant scars on both your mind and body. The good news is that Jesus wants to heal all your traumas.
If you'd like to hear the rest of the interview with Crystal and learn how trauma can be healed, come join us and Free Your Mind and do the course Healing from Trauma.
Free Your Mind is an online self-study program that will help you change how you think. It will guide you through a pathway of healing mentally, spiritually, and emotionally.
Through 15-minute videos, regular live group coaching calls, an online community forum, and 24-hour access to our entire video library, you can work at your own speed, anytime, from anywhere in the world, on any device to begin the life-changing transformation you've been looking for. You can learn more about it using the links below this video.
And below this video is a link to Crystal's website if you'd like to meet with her personally, and the Bible verses she mentioned in the video.
And we'll talk to you again next week, but this week, have a look inside. Are you experiencing any of the effects of trauma that Jesus is waiting to heal?